Maya sat in the back corner of the cafeteria, picking at her sandwich while the noise of hundreds of students filled the air around her. She had her earbuds in, but no music was playing. It was just easier this way. People left you alone when they thought you couldn't hear them. 6 months. That's how long it had been since her family packed up their entire life and moved to Riverside High School. Her dad got a promotion at his engineering firm, and they said it was a great opportunity. Better schools, safer neighborhoods, more opportunities for Maya's future. What they didn't mention was how different everything would be. Back home in Detroit, Maya blended in. She had friends who looked like her, teachers who understood her, and a whole community where she belonged. Here in this suburban school, she stuck out like a sore thumb. Not that anyone was outright mean to her. It was more subtle than that. The way conversations stopped when she walked by. The way some kids stared a little too long. The way teachers seemed surprised when she raised her hand with the right answer. Maya finished her sandwich and pulled out her biology textbook. She had a test next period, and studying was better than sitting there feeling awkward. As she flipped through the pages, she thought about what her Uncle Tony would say if he could see her now. He'd probably tell her to keep her chin up and remember what he taught her. Uncle Tony owned a gym back in Detroit called Iron Will Fitness. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. The kind of place where serious fighters came to train, where discipline mattered more than designer gear. Maya had been going there since she was 8 years old, when her parents thought martial arts might help her with confidence and focus. At first, she hated it. The other kids were bigger, stronger, and they'd been training longer. Uncle Tony paired her up with this older girl named Keisha, who showed her the ropes. Keisha was tough but patient, teaching Maya that fighting wasn't about anger or showing off. It was about control, respect, and knowing when to use your skills. The strongest fighters know when not to fight, Uncle Tony always said. Real power comes from discipline. Maya learned fast. She was naturally athletic, but more than that, she was smart. She studied every move, every technique, every strategy. By the time she was 14, she could hold her own against kids twice her size. Not because she was aggressive, but because she understood leverage, timing, and how to stay calm under pressure. The bell rang, snapping Maya back to reality. She packed up her books and headed to biology class, weaving through crowds of students who barely noticed she existed. That was fine by her. Being invisible had its advantages. In biology, she took her usual seat in the third row, right side. Close enough to show she was paying attention, but not so close that she seemed eager. Mrs. Patterson handed out the test papers, and Maya felt confident. She'd studied hard, just like she did everything else. As she worked through the questions about cellular respiration and mitosis, Maya let her mind wander to weekend plans. Her parents wanted to explore the city, maybe find a new restaurant to try. They were still trying to make this place feel like home, still hoping Maya would eventually love it here as much as they did. The truth was, Maya wasn't sure if she'd ever feel at home at Riverside High. Everything was so different from her old school. The building was newer, shinier, with fancy technology in every classroom. The students dressed differently, talked differently, and seemed to live in a completely different world from the one she grew up in. After biology, Maya had free period. Most students used this time to hang out with friends, but Maya preferred the library. It was quiet, peaceful, and the librarian, Ms. Chen, was one of the few adults who actually seemed to see her as an individual, rather than just another student to process. Maya found her favorite spot near the windows and pulled out her English homework. They were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which felt ironically appropriate given her current situation. The book was about standing up for what's right, even when everyone around you disagrees. It was about courage, dignity, and fighting battles that seemed impossible to win. As she read, Maya couldn't help thinking about Atticus Finch and his quiet strength. He didn't win his case, but he fought anyway because it was the right thing to do. Uncle Tony would have liked that character, Maya thought. He always said that true warriors pick their battles carefully. The library was almost empty except for a few students scattered at different tables. Maya liked it this way. No drama, no social politics, just peace and quiet. She could focus on her work without worrying about fitting in or saying the wrong thing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mom asking how school was going. Maya typed back a simple, "Fine," even though it wasn't really true. Her parents worried enough already. They'd left behind their own friends and community to give Maya better opportunities. The least she could do was not complain about the adjustment. Maya finished her English assignment and started on calculus homework. Math was the same everywhere, which was comforting. Numbers didn't care what you looked like or where you came from. If you did the work right, you got the right answer. Simple as that. As the final bell rang, Maya packed up her things and headed to her locker. The hallways filled with the usual chaos of students rushing to catch buses or meet up with friends. Maya moved through it all like a ghost, invisible and unnoticed. At her locker, she grabbed her jacket and the books she needed for homework. Tomorrow would be another day of staying quiet, staying focused, and staying out of everyone's way. It wasn't the high school experience she'd dreamed of, but it was manageable. Walking to the student parking lot where her mom would pick her up, Maya thought about Uncle Tony's gym. She missed the sound of gloves hitting heavy bags, the smell of sweat and determination, the feeling of being part of something bigger than herself. Here she was just trying to survive until graduation. But Uncle Tony had taught her something important about survival. Sometimes you had to bend so you wouldn't break. Sometimes you had to wait for the right moment to show your strength. And sometimes the quietest person in the room was the most dangerous one there. Maya didn't know it yet, but she was about to learn just how true that was. It started small, the way these things always do. Maya was walking to her first period English class when someone bumped into her shoulder, hard enough to make her stumble. She looked up to see a tall boy with blonde hair and a Letterman jacket walking away like nothing happened. "Sorry," he called over his shoulder, but his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. Maya steadied herself and kept walking. Accidents happen, right? Especially in crowded hallways where everyone's rushing to class. She didn't think much of it until it happened again the next day. Same boy, same accidental shoulder check, same fake apology. By the third time, Maya realized it wasn't an accident. The boy's name was Connor, and he was everything Maya wasn't at Riverside High. He played varsity football, had a girlfriend who looked like she belonged in a magazine, and came from one of those families where money was never a worry. His dad owned half the businesses in town, and his mom was president of the PTA. Connor traveled with a pack. There was Dylan, skinny with red hair and freckles, who laughed at everything Connor said even when it wasn't funny. Then there was Brett, stocky and mean-looking, who seemed to enjoy making other people uncomfortable. Together, they ruled their little corner of the school social scene. Maya tried to ignore them, but ignoring bullies doesn't make them go away. It just makes them try harder to get a reaction. The shoulder bumps turned into accidental trips in the hallway. Maya would be walking to class when suddenly someone's foot would appear in her path, sending her stumbling forward while her books scattered across the floor. By the time she picked everything up, she'd be late to class, earning disapproving looks from teachers who didn't understand what was happening. Then came the comments. Quiet enough that teachers couldn't hear, but loud enough for Maya to catch every word. "Nice hair," Dylan would whisper as she passed, making it sound like an insult. "Where'd you get those shoes?" Brett would ask, knowing perfectly well that Maya's family shopped at discount stores, not the expensive boutiques where his friends bought their clothes. Connor was smarter about it. He never said anything directly mean. Instead, he'd make observations that sounded innocent to anyone listening but cut deep for Maya. "You're so quiet," he'd say when she was forced to work with him on a group project. "Do you even speak English?" Maya's grades started to suffer, not because she wasn't smart, but because it's hard to concentrate on algebra when you're constantly watching over your shoulder. It's difficult to focus on history when you're dreading lunch period, wondering what new humiliation awaits. She tried talking to her parents about it, but she didn't know how to explain what was happening without sounding like she was overreacting. "Some kids at school are being mean to me," she told her mom one evening over dinner. "What kind of mean?" her mom asked, immediately concerned. "Just, comments and stuff. Bumping into me." Her parents exchanged that look that adults share when they're trying to figure out how serious something is. "Have you tried talking to a teacher?" Her dad suggested Maya had, actually. She'd approached Mrs. Patterson after biology class to mention that some students were making her uncomfortable. Mrs. Patterson listened politely and promised to keep an eye on things, but nothing changed. If anything, Connor and his friends got more careful about when and where they bothered. The locker incident was what made Maya realize this wasn't going to stop on its own. She arrived at school one morning to find her locker covered in sticky notes. From a distance, it looked like maybe someone had left her friendly messages. Up close, the reality was much worse. "Go back where you came from." Nobody wants you here. You don't belong. Maya peeled off the notes as quickly as she could, hoping no one would see, but the damage was done. Other students were already staring, some with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with the kind of satisfied looks that suggested they approved of what they were seeing. Connor walked by just as Maya crumpled up the last note. "That's terrible," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Who would do something like that?" But Maya caught the smile he tried to hide, and she knew exactly who was responsible. She reported the incident to the principal, Mr. Rodriguez. He was a kind man who genuinely seemed to care about his students, but he was also overwhelmed by the daily challenges of running a school with over 2,000 kids. "I'm sorry this happened to you, Maya," he said, sitting behind his big wooden desk covered in paperwork. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" Maya hesitated. She suspected Connor and his friends, but she had no proof. And she'd learned enough about how things worked at Riverside High to know that accusations against popular students didn't go over well without solid evidence. "No," she said finally. "I don't know who did it. Mr. Rodriguez promised to have the custodial staff clean her locker and said he'd ask teachers to be more aware of bullying behavior." But Maya could see in his eyes that without names or witnesses, there wasn't much he could do. The sticky note incident opened the floodgates. It was like Connor and his friends realized they could get away with almost anything, as long as they were smart about it. Maya's backpack went missing from the gym locker room. She found it later in the trash can, her homework soaked in something that smelled suspiciously like sports drink. Her lunch disappeared from the cafeteria table when she got up to get a napkin. She spent the rest of lunch period hungry, watching Connor and Dylan laughing at a table across the room. Someone signed her up for the school talent show using her name and wrote yodeling as her talent. Maya only found out when the drama teacher approached her about rehearsal times. Each incident was small enough that adults could dismiss it as typical teenage drama, but together they created a constant feeling of dread that followed Maya through every school day. The worst part wasn't even the pranks and mean comments. It was the isolation. Other students saw what was happening, but nobody stepped in to help. Some looked uncomfortable when they witnessed the bullying, but they didn't want to risk becoming targets themselves. Maya understood their fear, but it still hurt. Back in Detroit, kids looked out for each other. Here, everyone seemed focused on protecting their own social status. Maya's mom noticed the change in her behavior. "You seem sad lately, baby," she said one evening as they folded laundry together. "Is everything okay at school?" "It's fine," Maya lied, because she didn't want her parents to worry more than they already did. They'd given up so much to move here, and the last thing she wanted was to make them think it was all a mistake. But it wasn't fine. Maya was beginning to dread school in a way she never had before. She'd always loved learning, loved the challenge of difficult classes and the satisfaction of earning good grades. Now, education felt like something she had to endure rather than enjoy. Late at night, lying in her bed in their new house that still didn't feel like home, Maya would think about Uncle Tony's gym. She missed the feeling of being strong, of knowing she could handle whatever came her way. Here at Riverside High, she felt powerless, but Uncle Tony had taught her something else besides fighting techniques. He'd taught her that bullies usually escalate until someone stops them. And Maya was beginning to realize that Connor and his friends weren't going to stop on their own. They were just getting started. The day everything changed started like any other, Tuesday at Riverside High. Maya woke up, got dressed in her usual jeans and hoodie, ate breakfast while her mom reminded her about picking up her younger brother from elementary school, and headed off to face another day of trying to be invisible. But invisible wasn't working anymore. In first period English, Maya found her desk covered in pencil shavings. In chemistry, someone had replaced her lab notes with blank paper, leaving her scrambling to catch up during the experiment. By lunch, she was exhausted from constantly watching her back. The afternoon brought gray clouds and the promise of rain. Maya was actually relieved when the final bell rang, signaling the end of another difficult day. She gathered her books, grabbed her jacket from her locker, and headed toward the student parking lot where her mom would pick her up. The parking lot was nearly empty. Most students had already caught their buses or been picked up by parents eager to beat the afternoon traffic. Maya walked between the rows of cars looking for her mom's familiar blue sedan. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. "Hey," Maya. She turned to see Connor approaching with Dylan and Brett flanking him like bodyguards. The three boys spread out slightly, not enough to be obvious about cornering her, but enough to make Maya feel trapped between the parked cars. "What do you want?" Maya asked, keeping her voice steady even though her heart was starting to race. "Just wanted to talk," Connor said with that fake smile she'd learned to recognize. "You seem upset about something lately." Dylan giggled nervously. Brett just stared at Maya with cold eyes that made her skin crawl. "I'm fine," Maya said, taking a step backward. "My mom's coming to pick me up." "Oh, I don't see any cars coming," Connor said, looking around the mostly empty parking lot. "Guess you've got time to chat." Maya tried to walk around them, but Brett stepped to the side, blocking her path. Now she was definitely trapped, with cars on either side and the three boys in front of her. "Look," Connor said, his fake friendly tone dropping away. "I think there's been some confusion since you got here. This isn't your old school. Things work differently at Riverside." "I haven't done anything to you," Maya said. "Exactly," Connor replied. "You haven't done anything. You just show up, sit in your corner, act like you're better than everyone else. Do you think we don't notice? I'm not acting like anything. I'm just trying to go to school." Dylan laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Right, just trying to go to school. With your perfect grades and your teacher's pet attitude." Maya felt a flash of anger. She worked hard for her grades. She studied while these boys were out partying or playing video games. How dare they make her success sound like a bad thing? "My grades have nothing to do with you," she said. "Everything at this school has to do with us." Brett spoke for the first time, his voice low and threatening, "and we're tired of pretending it doesn't." The first drops of rain started to fall, pattering against the car windows and asphalt. Maya looked around desperately, hoping to see another student, a teacher, anyone who might interrupt this confrontation, but the parking lot remained empty except for the four of them. Connor stepped closer. "Here's how this is going to work. You're going to stop showing off in class. Stop making the rest of us look bad with your try-hard attitude. And maybe if you're really good, we'll leave you alone." "And if I don't?" Maya asked, even though she was pretty sure she didn't want to hear the answer. Connor's smile turned ugly. "Then we'll have to find other ways to help you understand how things work around here." Before Maya could respond, Connor reached out and shoved her hard against the side of a parked car. The metal was cold and wet against her back as she struggled to catch her breath. "See how easy that was?" Connor said. "Now imagine what happens if you keep being difficult." Maya tried to push past him, but Dylan grabbed her arm. "Where are you going?" Dylan asked. "We're not done talking." "Let go of me," Maya said, trying to pull free. Instead of letting go, Dylan tightened his grip. Brett moved closer, boxing her in even more. The rain was falling harder now, and Maya could feel water running down her face. "You know what I think?" Connor said, stepping so close she could smell his cologne mixed with sweat. "I think you need to learn some respect." His hand shot out toward her throat. Maya felt Connor's fingers close around her neck. Not quite a chokehold, but definitely a threat. His grip was firm enough to make breathing uncomfortable, light enough that he could claim it was just intimidation if anyone asked. "This is what happens when you don't listen," Connor said, his face inches from hers. For a moment, Maya felt exactly what Connor wanted her to feel. Helpless, scared, powerless. She thought about all the weeks of harassment, all the small humiliations, all the times she'd stayed quiet and hoped things would get better. Then she remembered Uncle Tony's voice in her head. "The strongest fighters know when not to fight," he'd always said, "but they also know when fighting is the only option left." Maya looked into Connor's eyes and realized she was done being a victim. "You made a mistake," she said quietly. "Yeah?" Connor tightened his grip slightly. "What's that?" "You assumed I was helpless." What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but Maya remembered every detail with cry. Style clarity. She brought her hands up in a classic defensive position that Uncle Tony had drilled into her thousands of times. Her right hand grabbed Connor's wrist while her left hand came up under his elbow. A simple twist and push, and suddenly Connor's grip on her throat was broken, and his arm was twisted at an uncomfortable angle. Connor yelped in surprise and pain. Stumbling backward, "What the?" Dylan started to say, but Maya was already moving. A basic foot sweep sent Dylan tumbling to the wet asphalt. He wasn't hurt, just surprised and embarrassed, sitting in a puddle while staring up at Maya with wide eyes. Brett was bigger and looked meaner, but size didn't matter when you knew what you were doing. As he reached for Maya, she stepped to the side and used his own momentum against him, sending him stumbling into the side of a car. The whole thing was over in seconds. 3 boys who had seemed so intimidating moments before were now scattered around the parking lot, looking confused and defeated. Maya stood in the center of it all, rain dripping from her hair, breathing hard but in complete control. "Here's how this is really going to work," she said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline pumping through her system. "You're going to leave me alone. You're going to stop the pranks, stop the comments, stop everything. Because if you don't—" She let the threat hang in the air, unfinished but perfectly clear. Connor was holding his wrist, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "You can't just attack people." "I'm telling the principal." Maya almost laughed. "Go ahead. Tell Mr. Rodriguez that 3 boys cornered 1 girl in an empty parking lot, and she defended herself. See how that works out for you." The sound of a car engine made them all turn. Maya's mom was pulling into the parking lot, her blue sedan cutting through the rain. "That's my ride," Maya said. She picked up her backpack from where it had fallen and walked toward her mom's car without looking back. As she got in the passenger seat, her mom looked concerned. "You're soaked, honey. What happened?" Maya glanced back at Connor, Dylan, and Brett, who were still standing in the parking lot looking stunned. "Just a little disagreement," Maya said, "but I think we worked it out." As they drove away, Maya caught Connor's eye through the car window. The message in her gaze was unmistakable. This changes everything. Connor and his friends had spent months making Maya feel powerless. Now they knew the truth. She was anything but helpless. The quiet girl they'd been bullying was gone. In her place was someone who wouldn't be pushed around anymore, and that someone was just getting started. Word travels fast in high school, especially when it's the kind of story nobody saw coming. By Wednesday morning, half the school had heard some version of what happened in the parking lot. The details got more dramatic with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. Quiet Maya had somehow taken down 3 of the most popular boys in school. Maya arrived at her locker to find students staring at her with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and disbelief. Some kids who had never spoken to her before nodded as she passed. Others whispered behind their hands, pointing in her direction. "Is it true?" asked a girl named Ashley who sat behind Maya in calculus. "Did you really beat up Connor Walsh?" Maya spun her locker combination, trying to figure out how to answer. She hadn't beaten anyone up. She'd defended herself, but she was learning that the truth and what people believed weren't always the same thing. "It wasn't a fight," Maya said carefully. "It was just a misunderstanding." Ashley looked disappointed, like she'd been hoping for more exciting details. Connor, Dylan, and Brett were notably absent from first period. Maya wondered if they were planning their revenge or if they'd finally gotten the message that she wasn't an easy target anymore. She got her answer in second period. Chemistry. Mr. Henderson was explaining molecular bonds when the classroom door opened and Mr. Rodriguez walked in, followed by Connor and his parents. Connor's dad looked like an older, angrier version of his son, wearing an expensive suit and the kind of expression that suggested he was used to getting his way. "Maya Thompson," Mr. Rodriguez said. "Could you come with us, please?" Every student in the room turned to stare as Maya gathered her books. She could feel their eyes following her as she walked toward the door, trying to look calmer than she felt. The walk to the principal's office felt like it took forever. Connor walked ahead of her with his parents, his shoulders stiff with embarrassment. His mom kept shooting worried glances at Maya, like she couldn't quite believe the small, quiet girl could be responsible for whatever story they'd been told. Mr. Rodriguez's office was crowded with Connor's family, taking up most of the chairs. Maya sat in the one remaining seat facing the principal's desk while Connor's parents flanked their son like protective bodyguards. "Maya," Mr. Rodriguez began, "the Walsh family has made some serious allegations about what happened yesterday afternoon." Connor's dad leaned forward. "My son was assaulted by this girl. He has witnesses." Maya looked at Connor, who couldn't quite meet her eyes. His wrist was wrapped in an elastic bandage, though Maya was pretty sure she hadn't hurt him that badly. "What's your version of events, Maya?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment where she had to decide whether to tell the truth or try to minimize what happened to avoid trouble. "Connor and his friends cornered me in the parking lot," she said. "Connor grabbed my throat. I defended myself," Connor's mom gasped. His dad's face turned red. That's ridiculous, Connor's dad said. My son would never— Mr. Walsh, Mr. Rodriguez interrupted. Let's let everyone speak. Connor finally looked up. She attacked us for no reason. We were just talking to her. With your hand around my throat? Maya asked. The room fell silent. Connor's parents looked at their son with new uncertainty. Connor? His mom said quietly. Did you touch this girl? Connor squirmed in his seat. I didn't hurt her. We were just trying to talk to her. Maya pulled out her phone. Actually, there might be video. Everyone in the room stared at her. Dylan was recording when it started, Maya explained. He dropped his phone when things got crazy, but he might have caught the beginning. Connor went pale. His dad looked like he was about to explode. Get me that phone, Mr. Rodriguez said. 20 minutes later, Dylan was in the office with his phone, his parents on the way. The video was shaky and short, but it clearly showed Connor approaching Maya aggressively and putting his hand on her throat before the phone dropped. Connor's parents watched their son on the small screen, their expressions shifting from anger to embarrassment to something that might have been shame. Connor, his mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. How could you? Connor's dad was staring at the floor, all his bluster gone. Mr. Rodriguez set the phone down on his desk. I think we have a pretty clear picture of what happened here. Maya was defending herself, he continued. Connor, you and your friends initiated physical contact with another student. That's assault, but she hurt my son, Connor's mom protested, though her voice lacked conviction. After he grabbed her throat, Mr. Rodriguez pointed out, Maya had every right to protect herself. The meeting ended with Connor facing a 3-day suspension and mandatory counseling sessions about bullying and respect. Dylan and Brett would face similar consequences once their parents arrived. As Connor's family left the office, his dad stopped and turned to Maya. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. This behavior is unacceptable. Maya nodded but didn't say anything. She'd learned that sometimes adults apologized more to make themselves feel better than to actually help the person they were apologizing to. After they left, Mr. Rodriguez sat back down across from Maya. I have to ask, he said, where did you learn to defend yourself like that? Maya hesitated. She'd been keeping her martial arts background quiet, partly because she didn't want people to think she was looking for fights. My uncle owns a gym back home, she said finally. He taught me some self-defense. Mr. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Well, I'm glad you knew how to protect yourself. But Maya, I hope you understand that violence should always be a last resort. It was, Maya said. I tried ignoring them for months. I reported the harassment. Nothing worked. Mr. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, probably realizing that his school's anti-bullying policies had failed to protect Maya when she needed help. You're right, he said. We should have done more to stop this before it escalated. I'm sorry about that. Maya returned to chemistry class to find everyone staring at her again, but this time the stares felt different. Instead of curiosity or pity, she saw something that looked like respect. At lunch, something unprecedented happened. Kids started sitting at her table. First it was Ashley from calculus, then a boy named Kevin who'd been in her English class all semester but had never spoken to her. Soon Maya found herself surrounded by students who wanted to hear her story firsthand. I can't believe you took down Connor Walsh, said a girl named Rebecca. He's been a jerk to half the school. I didn't take anyone down, Maya said. I just stopped him from hurting me. Same thing, Kevin said. Someone finally stood up to those guys. As Maya listened to the other students talk, she realized something surprising. Connor and his friends hadn't just been bullying her. They'd been making lots of students feel uncomfortable and unwelcome, but no one had felt strong enough to speak up. They made fun of my accent all last year, said a girl named Priya. Called me fresh off the boat even though I was born here. They started a rumor that I was gay because I didn't want to date Brett, added Rebecca. Made my life miserable for months. Story after story came out. Maya realized she hadn't been Connor's only target, just his most recent one. After school, Maya's mom was waiting in the pickup line as usual. As Maya got in the car, her mom studied her face carefully. The school called, her mom said. They told me what happened. Maya braced herself for a lecture about violence or getting in trouble. Instead, her mom reached over and hugged her. I'm proud of you, she said, for standing up for yourself and for trying to handle it the right way first. Are you sure? Maya asked. I mean, I did fight with other students. You defended yourself against bullies, her mom corrected. There's a big difference. That evening at dinner, Maya told her parents and her little brother about what had really been happening at school over the past few months. Her dad was angry that she'd suffered in silence for so long. "Why didn't you tell us how bad it was?" he asked. "I didn't want you to think moving here was a mistake," Maya admitted. Her parents exchanged a look. "Baby," her mom said, "your happiness is more important than any job or any house. If you're miserable here, we can figure something else out." "I'm not miserable," Maya said, realizing it was true. Not anymore. For the first time since moving to Riverside, Maya felt like she might actually belong somewhere. Not because she was quiet and invisible, but because she'd found the courage to stand up for herself and, in doing so, had given other students permission to do the same. The quiet girl was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more confident, and ready to make sure no one else had to face bullies alone. Maya was discovering that sometimes the most important fights aren't about proving you can win. They're about proving you won't give up. 3 weeks after the parking lot incident, Maya's life at Riverside High had changed in ways she never could have imagined. The most obvious change was that she was no longer invisible. Students who had walked past her for months without a glance now nodded when they saw her in the hallways. Some even stopped to chat between classes, asking about homework or sharing complaints about upcoming tests. But the biggest change wasn't how others saw Maya. It was how she saw herself. She walked taller now, made eye contact when people spoke to her, and raised her hand in class without worrying about standing out. The fear that had followed her through every school day was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that felt both new and familiar. Connor, Dylan, and Brett had returned from their suspensions, but they were different too. They kept their distance from Maya and seemed to have lost some of their swagger. Connor's parents had apparently had some serious conversations with him about respect and consequences, because he actually apologized to Maya in the hallway one day. "I'm sorry about what happened," he said, his face red with embarrassment. "It was stupid." Maya studied his face, looking for signs that this was another trick or manipulation. But Connor just looked tired and genuinely sorry. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that. It wasn't friendship, but it was a start toward something like mutual respect." The real surprise came during lunch on a Thursday in October. Maya was sitting with her new group of friends when Ashley approached their table with a nervous expression. "Maya," she said, "I have a weird question. My little sister is in middle school, and some 8th grade boys have been bothering her and her friends. She's too scared to tell her teachers or my parents. I was wondering, could you maybe teach her some of that self-defense stuff, you know?" Maya looked around the table. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her answer. "I don't really teach," Maya said. "I mean, I learned from my uncle, but I'm not an instructor or anything." "But you could show her some basic moves, right?" Ashley pressed. "Just enough so she feels like she can protect herself." Maya thought about it. Uncle Tony had always said that martial arts was about more than fighting. It was about confidence, discipline, and knowing you could handle whatever life threw at you. "Maybe," Maya said. "Let me think about it." That afternoon, Maya called Uncle Tony to tell him about Ashley's request. "Sounds like you've got an opportunity to help some kids," he said over the phone. "Question is, are you ready for that kind of responsibility?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "What if I teach them wrong? What if someone gets hurt?" Uncle Tony chuckled. "You think I wasn't scared the first time I taught a class? Fear means you're taking it seriously. That's good." They talked for another hour about basic techniques that were safe for beginners, the importance of teaching control along with technique, and how to help kids understand when self-defense was appropriate. "Remember," Uncle Tony said before they hung up, "the goal isn't to create fighters. It's to create confident kids who know they don't have to be victims." The next day, Maya approached Mr. Rodriguez about starting a self-defense club. "Interesting idea," he said, leaning back in his office chair. "What would something like that look like?" Maya had been thinking about it all night. Basic self-defense techniques, but also conflict resolution, bullying prevention, that kind of thing. Focus on staying safe and knowing when to ask for help. Mr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You'd need a faculty sponsor, and we'd have to make sure everything was appropriate and safe. I was thinking maybe Coach Martinez," Maya suggested. The wrestling coach was known for being tough but fair, and Maya had heard good things about him from other students. 2 weeks later, the Riverside High Personal Safety Club held its first meeting in the wrestling room after school. Maya had expected maybe 5 or 6 students to show up. Instead, she found 23 kids waiting for her, including Ashley's little sister who had convinced her mom to drive her over from the middle school. Coach Martinez introduced Maya as the club's student leader, and she felt a familiar flutter of nerves as she looked out at all the expectant faces. "I'm not a professional instructor," she began. "I'm just someone who learned that knowing how to protect yourself can change how you feel about yourself." She started with the basics: how to stand confidently, how to be aware of your surroundings, how to project strength even when you're scared. "The best self-defense is avoiding dangerous situations in the first place," Maya explained, echoing Uncle Tony's lessons. "But if you can't avoid trouble, you should know you have options." She taught them simple techniques: how to break free from someone grabbing your wrist, how to create space when someone gets too close, how to make enough noise to attract attention and help. But more than the physical techniques, Maya found herself talking about confidence, respect, and the importance of speaking up when something wasn't right. "Bullies count on their victims staying quiet," she told the group. "When you find your voice, you take away their power." After the first meeting, Ashley stayed behind to help clean up. "My sister feels different already," she said. "More confident," she said, knowing she could defend herself made her feel braver about everything. Maya smiled, remembering how Uncle Tony's training had given her the same feeling years ago. Word about the club spread quickly. By November, they had over 40 regular members and a waiting list of students who wanted to join. Maya found herself fielding requests from parents, teachers, and even other schools who wanted to know about their program. The club became about more than self-defense. They organized school-wide discussions about bullying, created peer mediation programs, and worked with younger students on conflict resolution skills. Maya discovered she loved teaching, not just the physical techniques, but the confidence and empowerment that came with them. Watching shy kids find their voices and nervous students learn to stand tall gave her a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. One evening in December, as Maya was walking to her car after a club meeting, she found herself in the same parking lot where everything had changed 3 months earlier. Instead of feeling anxious or afraid, she felt proud. That scared, lonely girl who had hidden in corners and tried to stay invisible was gone. In her place was someone who had found her strength and was using it to help others find theirs. Her phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Tony. "Heard about your club from your mom. Proud of you, kiddo. You're doing exactly what martial arts is supposed to be about." Maya smiled as she typed back, "Learned from the best." As she drove home through the familiar streets of her new town, Maya reflected on how much had changed. She thought about Connor and his friends, who had inadvertently taught her an important lesson about standing up for herself. She thought about all the kids in her club who were learning that they didn't have to accept being treated badly. Most of all, she thought about the girl she'd been when she first arrived at Riverside High, scared and alone and trying desperately to fit in. That girl had needed someone to show her that she was stronger than she knew. Maya was grateful she'd been able to become that someone, both for herself and for all the other kids who needed to learn the same lesson. Sometimes the most important battles aren't about winning or losing. They're about finding the courage to fight for what's right, standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves, and discovering that real strength comes not from how hard you can hit, but from how willing you are to protect and empower others. Maya had learned that the quiet ones are often the strongest ones, and now she was making sure that all the quiet kids at Riverside High knew they had a voice, they had value, and they never had to face their battles alone. The girl who had once tried to be invisible had become impossible to ignore, and she was just getting started.